Good Tuesday afternoon, 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a great day, and we're plenty of Browns to talk about. We are joined by Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. Mary Kay, let's start with this, and I know you've addressed this in a Hey Mary Kay. What do you think separates the Browns from the top 2 or 3 or 4 teams in the NFL right now?
Well, one of the things that they added is, of course, their quarterback. So they feel like they have that. Short of that, they need to add a couple of pass catchers. I really think that's vitally important for them to do that. I think that these playoffs and the championship games have shown that you need to have an array of weapons. And I really believe that they need to add some. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I keep looking at that, that big sort of nasty run stuffer in the middle that can get pressure, sort of the DJ Reader kind of guy. So I really believe that they need to get someone in here that is like that. And then they need the defensive end to replace Jadeveon Clowney. If they can add those pieces, then I think they should be right where they need to be.
And again, those are typically not the free agents or guys that break the bank. And we'll talk a little bit about the salary cap situation in a couple of segments. But those aren't the guys that you usually have to pay the, $20 or $30 million a year to.
Yeah, I mean, they should be able to find some pieces and parts. Now, like last year, for instance, Jadeveon Clowney, he did cost $10 million. If they can get that number 2 edge accomplished without having to pay that much, that would be ideal for them. Some of it will depend on what Jim Schwartz thinks he can get out of a guy like Alex Wright. Can he somehow unlock the pass rush sack potential of an Alex Wright, or do they need to go out and spend a bunch of money on a number 2 edge? As far as the defensive tackle is concerned, if you're going to be looking at a really, really good one, like a Daron Payne, who knows if he will even hit the market, or a Javon Hargrave, who knows if he'll hit the market. But then you're looking at a lot of money for a guy like that. And the same thing pretty much with some of the receivers. Generally, the really good ones, of course, are going to get paid. So those 3 positions that I'm talking about could set you back some. But I think the Browns have, ways of getting around that and finding the money that they need.
And again, we'll talk about what they can do. I think next segment we'll talk a little bit about that. I know you've addressed this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Browns MVP and most disappointing player, as well as some defining moments for the year that just wrapped up.
Yeah, you know what? For me, the MVP was Myles Garrett. I still thought that, that he was able to get so much done and so much accomplished without much help around him. Nobody else had more than 3 sacks. That was, Taven Bryan. So, he had to go out there and do that by himself pretty much. And, so, yeah, he was right up there. We got votes for Nick Chubb, too. It was, me, Dan, Doug, and Ashley. And, we obviously had some really nice attention there for Nick Chubb. And then Joel Bitonio. I mean, Joel Bitonio gets a lot of, maybe Joel was even the one we ended up with. I can't even remember now. Do I have him written down? But Joel Bitonio, he was the MVP of, the writers, the pro football writers, in the building. We named Joel Bitonio our MVP. So that might have been the one that we did on the podcast. I can't even remember the list of them now. Maybe you remember, but I kind of forget.
We'll go in offense and a defense. What about the most disappointing?
Most disappointing was Jadeveon Clowney, because he came in here and he had 9 sacks the year before, and he only managed to get 2. And then it wasn't just that, it was everything else that went along with it, taking himself out of the game, being a distraction, and all the things that happened with him. He was definitely high up on the list for most disappointing player. And then defining moment, we went back and forth. I mean, if you get a chance to listen to the podcast, anybody, it was, we had a good time with it. We had some good debate. And, I think we all kind of argued our points pretty well. But most defining moment, I thought, was when Deshaun Watson's suspension went from 6 games to 11. And I got to break the tie on any of our ties on the pod. And so if that one had been a tie, I think I might have pushed it over to the Deshaun Watson, 11 game suspension, because at that point, I think it really did kind of set the tone and dictate the whole season and how it all went.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that really put them, being the Browns collectively, behind the 8 ball with it. This again from something that you've answered. Would Brandon Cooks be a better trade target for the Browns than DeAndre Hopkins, do you think? And these are both guys that have been really productive with Deshaun Watson as a quarterback with Houston Texans.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Now, let me say, I have no idea if the Browns will be interested in trading for either of these guys, because you're talking about guys that will be 31 in Hopkins and 30 for most of their playing seasons next year. And you're starting to get up there a little bit for a receiver, but certainly they both seem to have plenty left in the tank, and they've got good chemistry with Deshaun Watson. If the Browns see to it that one of these guys would help, or if Deshaun Watson goes to them and says, I would really love to have, D-Hop or Brandon Cooks here, then I think that they would at least have to consider it. As far as those two are concerned, if Amari Cooper remains with the Cleveland Browns, and I know that's a controversial thing to even say, but we probably should talk about that, at some point. But, in the event that he's on the team, DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper kind of have a lot of overlap, whereas Brandon Cooks brings you a little bit more of the speedier, shiftier guy. So I would probably pair Amari more with a Brandon Cooks in that scenario. So we'll have to see. Again, I have no idea if the Browns would even think about trying to trade for either one of those guys, but it's definitely food for thought.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
Hi, this is Rico. Some teams are happy with just making the playoffs no matter the result. For example, the Jaguars are satisfied with the results of their season by making the second round of the playoffs. But then you have the other side of the spectrum, the Minnesota Vikings, who consistently make the playoffs, but their fans are highly disappointed with another first-round exit. My question is, what would classify as a successful season for the Browns? Just making the playoffs no matter the result, or do they have to go relatively deep into the playoffs to be considered a successful season? Thank you.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Mary Kay, I thought that was a really good question. What your thoughts on that?
It is a good question. And I think that, for this year, the bar had to be set at making the playoffs, even though they only had Deshaun for 6 games. I still thought that they should have been able to contend for a playoff spot. Next year, the bar has to be raised with Deshaun playing the whole entire season, and with you having what you feel is, your sort of, prize entry for a Super Bowl team with all your core players and the Myles Garretts, the Denzel Wards, the Nick Chubbs. I think that they would have to go deeper into the playoffs than just, making the wild card round and losing. I don't think that's good enough. You're paying Deshaun Watson $46 million a year. You've got to do better than one and done. So I think that they need to at least get to the divisional round for this season to be considered a success. Yeah,
I would agree. You're in year 2 really with Deshaun Watson as well. So you paid a lot of money because you think you're there. Again, this is from an Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Should Kevin Stefanski continue calling the plays? What do you think?
I think he should head into the season calling the plays, see how it goes. I know that he hasn't had a full season with Deshaun yet. He's just learning him. I know those two guys want to work together. We know that Deshaun Watson likes Kevin Stefanski and wants to, go over this whole offensive thing with him and see what those two guys can come up with. So I would at least start out the season doing that, because you can always give it up at some point. What you can't really do is, turn it over to Alex Van Pelt or someone and then just take it back 4 games in. So I think he should do it. I think he should show everyone what he's got calling plays for Deshaun Watson. And if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, then you can pivot at that point.
So the two things that I would say is Nick Sirianni gave up play calling with the Eagles. They're in the Super Bowl. Now, the other thing is Nathaniel Hackett gave up calling plays for Russell Wilson, and he didn't make it through the season. So neither one is a silver bullet or guaranteed for success. We found this one really interesting as well. So this is top head coaches in-game win probability added over expected. Basically, it measures how each in-game decision increased or decreased the probability of a team's chances of winning. And you take a look at it. Number one on this is Brandon Staley. He's another guy that's kind of on the hot seat. They lost that playoff game. Number 2 is John Harbaugh of the Ravens. 3 is Sean McDermott for the Eagles. 4 is Nick Sirianni of the Eagles. 5 is Kevin Stefanski, and 6 is Andy Reid. So Kevin Stefanski's right between the 2 Super Bowl teams as far as the decision-making that he makes in-game. And you see it goes to 4th down in converting it 2 points, first half timeouts, second half timeouts, delay of game warnings, all of the decisions that go into making. It's a analytics tool, and we were kind of surprised that Kevin Stefanski was rated that highly. Again, it is data driven. So just your reaction to seeing that.
Yeah, I would say I would have been surprised about that as well. But you can see that most of those coaches up at the top are the ones that we really do traditionally think of as the ones that are analytics driven and going by the numbers with a lot of their decision making. So, maybe there is a little more to that than people give it credit for. And, I think it's great to see Kevin up there, especially, at a time when he is, I would say, kind of not on the hot seat from the team standpoint, but from a fan standpoint, right. He certainly takes his lumps. Yeah,
well, fans are questioning what he's doing. Some data-driven. Again, those are numbers-driven things that rank him where they have him ranked. Mary Kay Cabot and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk some about the offensive side of the football. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
As a fan base, the Browns need to take into consideration, just watching the 4 games, what it takes to get to the Final Four and what it takes to really win it. The one thing that you need a complete team. You need a complete scheme, and you have to have the strength and the right personnel to really go far within the Final Four. And it's not just, you have to have the quarterback and, you got to have a defense. No, you have to have complete everything if you look to get far within the playoffs. And, looking at, the Chiefs, offense, I can see us doing a lot of that in 2023, which is spreading the wealth, getting guys, get opportunities to succeed and everything else like that, and then bruising defenses with Chubb. And I see our defense is going to look just like the Eagles and what they're doing, because they're just using the exact same scheme that Schwartz used. It's just upgraded, and you see that. And I just can't wait for the 2023 season.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mary Kay, if they're going to look like the Eagles, they're going to have to upgrade the guys on that defensive line pretty significantly.
Yes, absolutely. And, the thing about the Browns right now is they have a defensive line-centric defensive coordinator. So you can rest assured that he is going to put a lot of attention and thought into that defensive line. That's what he's all about. That's what he's known for. He's going to make sure that they've got the defensive tackles that they need, that they have the defensive ends that they need, and that they are playing the way that they need to get the most out of Myles Garrett. That's certainly something that you can expect will improve a lot. Now, this year, the Browns had only 34 sacks, okay? That is 27th or tied for 27th in the NFL. For comparison's sake, the Eagles had 70, and that was number 1 in the NFL. So, you know that he's going to do everything he possibly can to increase that number. And it's not going to come from blitzing. It's going to come primarily from the front four. And the Browns really struggled in that area. That is a point of emphasis.
All right, I know you've written about this as well. So how do you think an offense centered around Deshaun Watson, we assume it's going to be centered around him because they're paying him a lot of money and guaranteeing $230 million for him, centered around him, how does it impact Nick Chubb? And is that Watson-Chubb duo a championship duo, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I think Nick is still at the top of his game right now, and I think Deshaun recognizes the value in having a Nick Chubb, not only in the running game, but it looks like he wants to be able to throw the ball to him even more. So hopefully Nick will work hard on his receiving game in the offseason. So especially with Kareem Hunt being gone, that he can be part of that even more so than he has been, and not necessarily have to come off the field in passing situations. They're still going to have to give him some breathers here and there to keep him fresh throughout the game. So maybe that's where a Jerome Ford comes in. But I do think that those two guys together are two of the best at their positions, quarterback and running back. So they should be a championship duo. They should be the foundation of a really good offense.
Again, you've written an article on this. Take us through John Johnson, 3 other players the Browns must make big decisions on. Take us through those and, kind of the thought process.
Oh, well, yeah, that's good. That gives me an opportunity. I mentioned that we were probably going to have to talk about Amari Cooper at some point during the show. So I will mention him in this part of it. So the first one I have there is John Johnson 3. He's got a $13.5 million cap hit for next season. Anybody on this team, and there are 8 of them, that have double-digit millions cap hit for 2023, those players will be looked at as possible candidates for a restructuring, for a cut, or for a trade. And so John Johnson fits right in there. I think there's a chance that they feel like they can get that safety job done, accomplished for less than $13.5 million. So therefore, you go to him, you go to his agent, and you see if they would be willing to do a restructure. Actually, the first thing that you have to do is go to Jim Schwartz and see how he feels about John Johnson 3 and what he can do in his defense. If he can do way more than what he's done previously, and if he feels he is worth that kind of money, well, then that changes the picture there a little bit too. But he's somebody that will definitely be looked at. He's a June 1st consideration. They can save $9.75 million if they trade or cut him after June 1st, or designate him to be traded or cut after June 1st. So he's one to keep an eye on. I put Amari Cooper in there because he falls into the category of June 1st, you could save $20 million by cutting or trading him. He's got a cap hit of $23.77 million. Once again, he is a player that will be looked at. Now, he's amazing, and he's done a fantastic job for the Browns. Nobody wants to be without Amari Cooper next year. If you were, you'd really have to replace him with something of similar value and talent and ability. But again, when you have that kind of a cap hit, you have to look at that. So what do? Do you go to his agent? Do you talk about another restructure where you lower that cap hit? Maybe that's what they'll do. We'll have to see how that goes. And then center Ethan Posick, he is due to be a free agent. He did great. He was the 11th center according to PFF, and he's somebody that you really want to try to keep around if you can. But his agents know that he was very valuable this year. He would be the top center on the market, and he stands to get paid. And those guys don't have too many opportunities where they can hit the jackpot. So the Browns are going to have to either pay up or they're going to have to let him walk. That's going to be a very difficult decision to have to make. Then the last one that I had on there was Anthony Walker. I could have picked a number of different guys for the last one, because there are others, and I probably will do a column like that again and come up with like another 4 guys that they have to make decisions on. But the last one here, Anthony Walker, he's coming off of a difficult surgery. It's a torn quad, and those are tough to come back from. But he's a valuable player. If he can be healthy this year, he is somebody that you want on your team. So he's another one that they're going to have to take a look at.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about salary cap before we go to break. So we know now the 2023 salary cap will be $224.8 million. That's up from $208.2 million. Jack Duffin plays around with the salary cap a lot, and if you follow him on Twitter, you know he does. So Browns cap space, including rollover, is $14.445 million. If they do the JJ3 June 1st cut, they can save $975, as you said. They can also restructure Deshaun Watson, $35.9 million. Myles Garrett, $12.9 million. Wyatt Teller, $9.1 million. Joel Bitonio, $7.8 million. 8 draft picks are going to cost them almost $1.8 million. If they make those moves by just designating JJ3 and restructuring, they create $60.4 million in cap space. Eventually, the cap bill comes due, but you can push it down the road so that you can sign guys when you feel you're in your window. Those are moves, and when we say restructure, it doesn't cost the players any money. They get it up front. They get the money up front, comes off the cap. That creates $60 million in cap space that you can go out and get the type of players that we had talked about in free agency.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that they're going to have to do. Deshaun Watson's cap hit alone for the 2023 season is like almost $55 million. Again, there are 8 players in double-digit cap numbers, millions, and all of those players were on that list that you just showed. And, so you can skim some off the top, give them some more in some signing bonus money, spread things out, put some voidable years in. There are things that you can do, and they will have whatever money that they need to sign whatever free agents they want to sign, and to trade for whatever players they want to trade for, and to pay all of their draft picks and do all of that kind of stuff. So there's nothing really to worry about. Even though right now it seems like they don't have any cap space.
Yep, they'll find a way to get it. Eventually it'll catch up, but you worry about that when hopefully after you go to a Super Bowl or two, you worry about the cap implications. Mary Kay Cabot and I are going to step aside, take one more time, other side of the break. We'll talk a little bit about Myles Garrett and some free agents that could hit it big with their new team. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. All right, this is by Dogs by Nature, Browns mock draft trade up. So they have the Browns trading into the latter part of the first round by giving up their 2nd round pick, their 4th round pick, their 5th round pick, as well as a 2024 3rd round pick to get back into the bottom part of the first round, where they would take Jordan Addison, wide receiver, USC. Dynamic playmaker, game-changing ability. Isn't the size-speed combination some might want, but he would be a weapon that allows Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones to excel on the outside, moving around the formation. Mary Kay, I don't see any way that that they trade that many assets to get back into the first round. I just don't see them doing that. I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, you can never say never. We never really know what they have in mind. I mean, if there is a player that they absolutely feel like they have to have that is in the first round, then I suppose they could think about doing that. But it doesn't seem like the analytics way for them to do that. Usually they would go in the other direction and acquire more assets and more swings at the plate and try to add more talent. So, we'll have to see how that goes. But I think the thing that the Browns pride themselves on is finding first-round talent in the second round. And so I think they would be more likely to do that, to just really work so hard like they did with a JOK to find somebody like that they can get in the second round. They have a first-round grade on.
And again, I know you've written about this. Myles Garrett, you feel like he should have been a finalist for NFL Defensive Player of the Year. When you look at the double teams and the sack numbers and all that, I agree with you. Do you think he was hurt because the Browns' record wasn't what it was, or was what it was?
Yes, he absolutely was. And then when I watched Chris Jones play this past game, I just realized, not that I didn't realize it before, but it really hit home just how good he is. And, would you have reasonably been able to take Chris Jones off that list? Because I think he's probably the guy that I had in mind that I feel like Myles stacked right up against. What Myles didn't have that Chris Jones does have is a good football team, a playoff contending football team. And so, yes, I do think that really hurt Myles, and he's going to have to get this team going in the direction that he needs it to go if he wants to get some of those awards on the way to the Super Bowl.
How excited are you to see him play in what we believe will be the wide nine scheme with Jim Schwartz? Because Jim Schwartz seems to always find a way to get guys to the quarterback. That's for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, it should suit him very well. And that, if he's saying that he hopes to get even more out of Myles Garrett than what he's gotten, I mean, 16 sacks back to back, that's pretty darn good. So if he plans on getting more than that, then then he will be earning his money at defensive coordinator for sure. But it will isolate Myles in such a way that it should free him up a little bit more. And that's a major reason why they hired Jim Schwartz, was to make sure that they could maximize the potential of Myles Garrett.
All right, before I let you go, free agents who could blow up on their new teams in 2023. This is from the Bleacher Report. First one on the list, running back Kareem Hunt. They also say wide receiver DJ Chark, edge rusher Marcus Davenport, linebacker David Long Jr., and safety Jesse Bates. A couple of those guys have been linked to the Browns, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kareem Hunt goes somewhere and has a lot of success. Would you?
No, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he just really needs an opportunity more than anything else. And I still think he has plenty left in the tank.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Mary Kay.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Mary Kay Cabot. Make sure you check her out. Always great stuff on the Browns, cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we are joined by Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, talking more Browns. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report, senior analyst. Fred, I know you wrote an article for the Orange and Brown Report, an early look at what the Browns can do in 2023 in the offseason to address, what went wrong in 2022. So take me through that and kind of the things you think that are the most important. Obviously, the defensive coordinator is there, so that's probably a good start.
Yeah, I think, David, that was the biggest move, to get that addressed, because the defense was no question the downfall of the team in 2022. The offense, even with Jacoby Brissett, played much better than anticipated. It actually dropped off when Deshaun Watson came back. So I think it was all on the defense. Everybody expected the defense to pick up where it left off in 2021 because you had 9 of the 11 starters returning, same system, all those things. And it did not do that. They really let them down in that stretch, where they lost like 4 games by 9 points, and they couldn't hold the lead in all 4 of those games. If you only won 2 of them, you would have made the playoffs, as much as everything went wrong. And so to me, it's kind of the pendulum. Last year, it seemed like you had to get the offense fixed. They went out and did the big swing to get Watson. This year, it's kind of back on the defensive side. So you got to do some adjustments on offense, but the big pendulum is swerving to the defense, because I think, this defense gave up 22, 23 points a year. It went down in the last few games, and so it's a little deceiving. They were giving up 25, 26 points a game. And if you could get it closer to 20, 21, area, I think this offense should be able to score enough points to win on a regular basis next year. I say should. I mean, they put all the chips in the middle on Deshaun Watson and the offense. So I think they will score points. It's on the defense to keep them in games and allow them to win games.
When you prioritize that, and you look at the roster, I mean, there's holes in it, obviously, but the defense just didn't perform the way it should. What areas do you think need immediate upgrades to do what Jim Schwartz wants to do?
We can only go on the past and what we saw. What he's traditionally done is build a strong defensive line. In his introductory press conference, he said the most important thing is the pass rush. It disrupts a game more than any other area, because now corners can't get their hands on the receivers and all the different things on defense. So it's all about the defensive line. I expect them to address that hot and heavy. Obviously, you have Myles Garrett, but you need someone to go with him, and you need some run-stopping defensive tackles. He's had the number 1 rushing defense in the NFL, as recently with the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl, held opponents under 80 yards a game. And we all know the Browns need that. And that's got to jump out in the film to him, when they gave up over 130 yards rushing in like 10 of the last 14 games. So I expect the defensive line being major focus there.
When you look at what he likes to do, he likes to have the receivers, the cornerbacks up on the receivers and make life difficult at the line of scrimmage. Do you think there is a guy that can play that single high, free safety, whatever you want to call it, that's on this roster, or is that something else that they have to go and get?
Well, I think that's got to be a big topic of discussion. What is John Johnson? Can he be that? Or do you move on from him? He's going to, you can save about $9 million if they decide to move on from him after June 1st. So I think a lot of these questions are going to come out when we see March 15th and free agency begins, or even maybe moves prior to restructuring or letting guys go, or different moves they make, that will have a big imprint on Jim Schwartz and how he wants to run this defense going forward. But yeah, I don't know. I've heard some talk, maybe Martin Emerson could be a safety, so big and so forth, but I don't think you would look at him as the answer, never playing there. I think that they have to look at Delpit and they have to look at Johnson, decide, okay, those are really the 2 guys. I don't think Ronnie Harrison's going to come back. I would be surprised. And then all you have beyond him is Anthony Bell, who was a promising undrafted free agent, but he didn't really play. He just played on special teams. So, yeah, I think those are big decisions. And you got, there's been a lot of talk, was John Johnson used the way he was with the Rams? Was it, you spent all that money to bring him here, and he just didn't really make the impact that everybody expected. I looked back, when he was a free agent, and everybody out across the board thought that was a home run. That was the guy you need, come from the number one defense in the NFL, and he was the signal caller. So was it the scheme, or was it his drop off in play? I think Jim Schwartz is going to answer that question, and he's a big one. What do they do with?
Yeah, and again, the thing that you keep hearing from Jim Schwartz is it's going to be a simple scheme. A high school I believe the words were a high school coach will understand our scheme. You couldn't say that about Joe Woods' defensive scheme. I think it was just a little too much, read, react, do this. When there's too many contingencies that keep a defense from playing fast. Let's talk about the free agent rankings. So defensive tackle, we've talked about the need for that. This is from ESPN.com, the 50 best free agents that could potentially hit the market. And we're going to look at the D tackles. Number 3 is Javon Hargrave. You see he will be 30 next year. He is very familiar with the scheme. He played for Jim Schwartz with the Eagles. So that's a name to keep an eye on. At 30, he might not get the huge contract that some of the younger guys might. Like, say this guy, Deron Payne. It's a name you hear attached to the Browns a lot. He is the 4th ranked defensive tackle, or a free agent rather, also a defensive tackle. Payne was with the Commanders a lot younger, just 26. So you see, he could be in line for a big deal based on the year that he had and his age. A little bit further down that list, number 16, another defensive tackle. This name will be familiar to area folks. He is from Cleveland. Draymond Jones from Ohio State, played at St. Ignatius in high school, 25, is considered an ascending player. His pass rush win rate, pretty good. First step, quickness, short area, disruptive upside. The question is, can he do what you need him to do in the run game? And then the 30th ranked free agent that could potentially hit the market, Delvin Tomlinson, age 29, bit bigger. He can play in the 3 and 4 man fronts and really good at clogging up the middle. Again, at 29, might not get as big of a contract as some of the younger guys. When you look at those guys, anybody there of those 4 intrigue you that you think the Browns would be probably prioritizing?
Well, I think there's a lot of them. I'd be happy with like any of them, but it will be interesting to see how Andrew Berry approaches this, because he has been very, what I would call very not aggressive or whatever in defensive tackles, high priority. When he got here, Sheldon Richardson was the best they had, and he was under contract for like the last year of his deal was like 11, 12 million, and they let him walk. They just cut him. And he actually, I had heard that he was offered more money by the Browns to come back, and he ended up going to the Vikings. He didn't play last year. The biggest free agent, they've signed defensive tackles, been like Andrew Billings, Malik Jackson, last year, Taven Bryan. So they've been guys, maybe they're a little older or at one time had high value, but kind of dropped off. I think usually what happens, there's a bidding war with the top ones. I expect Barry to be very aggressive in getting somebody on the defensive line. I don't know if it'll be defensive tackle or defensive end, but I could see more of the veteran guys, that he has a history, or Jim Schwartz has a history, with, maybe a Fletcher Cox, if he hit open market on a 1-year deal, a 32-year-old, or like you mentioned here, Tomlinson, guys that they're not going to throw a ton of money at, because they, in my opinion, they need a couple of those guys. They kind of swung for the fence thinking that Jordan Elliott or Tommy Togiai or Perrion Winfrey was going to be able to make it. And they haven't really went after free agents. and they haven't really spent much in draft. I mean, the highest guy they drafted was Jordan Elliott in the 3rd round. So I think they're telling them we need stoppers, and I just don't know if they'll be able to afford, some of the guys if they get into a bidding war. Another area to look at is the trade market. If there's a guy there that's, that's the surest way to get a guy, then you get to free agency, and you see this with a bidding war, and they get crazy money, especially at wide receivers and so forth. And if you can trade a guy, you get a salary, but then you can restructure it or do some of those things. So I like these free agents. It just depends how aggressive other teams are at a Hargrave or a Payne. And we always see this on the top list. And then by free agency, one by one, they disappear. Either they get franchised or transition tagged or re-signed to a long-term deal. And so, this is a great smorgasbord at this time. But I'm looking more maybe not the superstar guy, maybe a guy that can come in and play at a much higher level than what they had this year.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I get to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, take a look at a couple of more free agent position groups as well. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back talking Browns.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
So I have a question. If Deshaun Watson is not that good, do you think that the Browns would start somebody else, or do you think they'll keep him? Or I just want to know what y'all would think about that. And thank you. Bye.
All right, as always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, Browns, there are 230 million guaranteed reasons that Deshaun Watson will be the starting quarterback. You said it earlier. They put all of their eggs in that basket. He's their quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't trade 3 number ones, especially all the draft nicks around here in Cleveland at this time. You're kind of left with not a lot to talk about other than free agency. 3 number ones and 2 other higher picks. And 230 million guaranteed. If there was going to be a chance to ease him back in, I thought the way Brissett was playing, maybe they'd go down to Houston, especially since it was in Houston, and Brissett would start, maybe even play the first half, and then maybe ease Watson in. No, cold turkey right from the beginning. He's their guy. He's not coming out unless he's injured. I cannot see any of that. Even think of Baker Mayfield. He was struggling. He was injured. And he had Case Keenum under contract for $8 million. And we went through this. Why in the world aren't you playing Case Keenum? And Stefanski just does not want to go down that road. If he's got the starter, he's not going to go with somebody else. And next year, as it stands right now, you're looking at Kellen Mond, who would probably be the backup because they kept him on the roster over Dobbs because of his contract situation. So, unless they spend some money to get a veteran backup, there's not going to be a quarterback controversy anytime soon.
I would agree. I know you also kind of did some analysis and looking ahead at the Browns quarterback. How different do you think this offense looks with Deshaun Watson, and what do you expect to see more of?
I expect to see more of the run pass option, running with Chubb and getting mirrored more with him out of the shotgun. And, kind of, okay, they collapse on Watson, you get it out to Chubb if they go at him, he takes off and uses his legs. I think he's going to have, more of those kind of read, run, pass options. You got to be able to mirror the running game with his passing game. You don't pay a $230 million quarterback to just hand the ball off 25 times a game. You want him to run, but not crazy. But you want him to also be able, to work the field effectively. So we didn't see much of the long ball. So I expect them to utilize more of the long ball, and they really have to get, a deep threat wide receiver, in my opinion, one of the top priorities this offseason.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think they'll throw some seam routes to David Njoku, which you didn't see a whole lot of that as well. That's another part that Watson does well. We talked about defensive tackles a little bit earlier. Let's take a look at some of the edge rushers. This is the same NFL free agency list, 50 available, top 50 available players as of now that are projected to be available. This is an intriguing one. Marcus Davenport, defensive end, the Saints, will be 27, has a little bit of injury history, low sack total, but does get pressures. You see his size. As I describe this kind of sounds like a little bit of the knock that you heard from Jadeveon Clowney. Kind of impacts pressures but doesn't get the sack. So 24th on this list is Zach Allen, edge rusher from the Cardinals. A little bit younger, and again, a guy that's ascending, 6'4", 280 pounds. 32nd on this list is Yannick Ngakoue from the Colts, a guy that the Browns were interested in before he signed with the Colts. Again, 28, so kind of in that age range, has the top-end traits that you look for. Another interesting one in 39th on this list is Brandon Graham from the Eagles. So he's never played for anybody other than the Eagles, was a first-round pick. Career-high 11 sacks, 13th NFL season. So again, that might be a guy that you get for a year or two on a deal because he is up there in age. And the last guy on this list that we'll take a look at, Arden Key, edge rusher from Jacksonville. Again, upside as a situational pass rusher. When you say situational, that means he's not going to cost you as much. He does have, the age that you would look at 27. You look at those guys again. Who of those edge guys who kind of grabs your attention there?
Well, I do think they have to address that in a big way. Clowney obviously didn't work out, but there's much more defensive tackles available than there are defensive ends, so that factors in. A couple years ago, I really wanted him to get Trey Hendrickson from the Saints. He was, he ended up with 20 sacks that year, and the Bengals signed him right out of the get-go. Browns went and got Clowney. I could see them doing 2 one-year deals, as opposed, to a Clowney. I wrote that in the story. Last year they spent $10 million on Clowney, got 2 sacks out of him in 11 games. A guy like Jerry Hughes, he was 35 years old. He went to Houston on a 1 year, signed for, I think, $6 million, and he had 9 sacks. And Melvin Ingram went to the Dolphins on a 1 year for like $5 million or $4 million, and he had 6 sacks. So you got 15 sacks for the same $10-11 million. And if you're going to, beef yourself up, I'd rather have 2 guys on 1 year deals than one big price guy. If you can get a free agent, on the list I looked earlier, PFF, I know the Browns like PFF. They had Clowney as the second best available edge rusher, with Davenport just ahead of him. So that tells me, there's not a lot of bigger names. So I can see him going after Yannick, a guy they've been interested in before, or Arden Key. Another guy to keep an eye out, I don't even know how to say it, Obo Okonorakwa. I know Okoro plays for the Cavs. It's kind of like that, OKOR. He's with the Texans, and he was an undrafted guy. He's only 27, but he had like 5 or 6 sacks last year. And I can see a couple of those type guys that aren't well known, maybe a little under the radar, a little more salary cap friendly. You have to realize they're dealing a little bit with the restrictions because of the money they spent on Watson. They can restructure several contracts to get them money, but I don't see them just taking the top guy off every position because you got other teams bidding for him too. And so I see him maybe making a splash with one player like they did with John Johnson that year, and they did with Jack Conklin the first year. But I see him maybe, going, with maybe a couple guys, maybe under the radar type guys.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break, talk a little bit more about the free agent market for the Browns, take a look at some safeties, plus some guys that the Browns can't afford to lose. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, longtime Browns beat reporter. Fred, let's take a look at some free agent safeties, the same listing that we had from ESPN.com ranking the top 50 available. Number 11 is a guy we've talked about quite a bit, Jessie Bates. The question will be, he played on the franchise tag. Can the Bengals afford to pay him? They have some free agents. They're going to have to pay Joe Burrow a whole lot coming up as well. So that'll be an interesting one. 14, another guy that is playing in the Super Bowl this year, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You see the age, very young. Urgent defender on tape, coverage traits, ball skills to fit in multiple defensive schemes. 23 is a guy on this list from the Bills that Browns fans will remember. Jordan Poyer was a special teams player for the Browns a few years back, getting up there in age at 32, but still a really good safety. 46, another one of the Bengals, more of a box type safety, Von Bell from Ohio State. As you look at safeties, can you see them going big over a free safety if they decide that it isn't John Johnson III? Or do you think they go with a lesser-known guy?
Yeah, it's, with the emphasis we do know with Schwartz on the defensive line, I would think you'd try to make your big splash on the defensive line, and I don't think you can make too many big splashes. I mean, if there was one, Jessie Bates stands out because I always like when the Browns sign a guy from a division rival. It hurts them and helps you. I don't know. The Bengals, did the franchise with him. You have to pay him a percentage even more if you do it again. It's hard for me to believe they would sign him to a big contract. So he could be a real possibility. The Gardner-Johnson obviously is young and good. When you're on the Eagles, they seem to find ways to keep guys, especially, if you win the Super Bowl or you think you can win the Super Bowl. Poyer, you still scratch your head how the Browns just cut him and let him go, and he became an all-pro safety with the Bills. Again, I look at Schwartz's connections. He was with the Titans. There's a couple guys to keep an eye on. Andrew Adams, he's 30, and then there's Joshua Kalu. He's 27. Those are both guys, safeties, becoming free agents with the Titans. And so Schwartz is familiar with them. If he likes them, he would have a connection. And there's one from the Eagles, Marcus Epps. If the Eagles think that Epps is ready to take over for Gardner-Johnson, they may keep Epps, but they might not be able to keep them both. So Marcus Epps is a guy to keep an eye on as well. Those might be a little more friendly. I think they will sign a safety, but I don't know if it'll be one of the top free agents. As we've said over the years, You always seem to pay higher to be aggressive to go get the top free agents because other teams do the same thing.
Yep, and I agree with you. There's going to be a couple of guys that Jim Schwartz is comfortable with, that knows what his system is all about, that he brings in to try to help smooth over the transition a little bit. This is according to Dog Pound Daily. 3 free agents the Browns cannot afford to lose in 2023. Number 3, Ethan Posick, a center. Number 2, A.J. Green, a cornerback. And number 1, Anthony Walker, the linebacker. When you look at those 3, if Walker is healthy, I think he would probably fit really well in what Jim Schwartz does. And I think Posick may have played himself out of the Browns' price range. I think he's probably going to get more money than the Browns want to pay.
Yeah, I mean, Walker, I'd agree. Last year I felt like they undervalued him because he was a free agent and he walked. He could have went anywhere. So many times free agents just don't come back to the same team because they almost feel like disrespected. He felt comfortable enough to come back on a 1-year deal with the Browns, and he ends up winning the starting job and being the signal caller. Most people assume Jacob Phillips was going to be the guy. That's the guy they wanted, and he couldn't beat out Walker. And then you felt like the defense kind of fell apart when Walker got hurt because he really was the leader on the defense. Unless Schwartz doesn't really think he's the guy he wants, I would think Walker would be the top priority. A.J. Green has been a role player. They're moving on, I assume, from Greedy Williams. And so they do need at least a 4th cornerback. But I don't know if that's a big must because I think Martin Emerson is past him. Ethan Posick, yeah, I think he was a mild surprise because Nick Harris is who they handed the job to. They didn't say this was an open competition. He tore his ACL in the first preseason game, but there was no real competition leading up to that first preseason game. So I have to believe unless Posick showed them he is better than Harris, that they would like him back, but I don't think they're going to break the bank. They've already extended big time 3 of their 5 offensive linemen.
Yeah, it's they can't pay everybody on that offensive line without question. All right, obviously defensive line is important. Safety is important as well. Let's talk a little bit about wide receiver. A veteran wide receiver, I think, kind of finishes it. You mentioned the deep threat. I think it needs to be a deep threat that stretches the field vertically and horizontally. You want the guy that if you spread everything out the way that they're going to do that with run-pass options, if you get the ball 4 or 5 yards, he can turn it into 10, 12 pretty quickly. Is that kind of the way you're thinking about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I liked everything Donovan Peoples-Jones did last year. He emerged, but I still would like at least a guy between Amari Cooper and Peoples-Jones, or if not, at least a guy that's right there. That you have 3 veteran guys that can make plays. I just don't think you can count on David Bell, Anthony Schwartz, or any of the other guys currently on the roster, nor can you count on a drafted rookie. Even if you take a guy in the 2nd round, I don't think you can count on him to step right in and be battle-tested, ready to go day one. We've seen that over and over with wide receivers. You need to get a guy that's been there, done that as soon as he steps on the field, he's a threat. Amari Cooper, you got him in a trade for a 5th-round pick, obviously because of his big contract. There's some veterans with big contracts that if you can get a Brandon Cooks or even a DeAndre Hopkins, sure, they got a hefty salary, but if you could get them, for a 5th, 6th round pick, or even a higher pick, but you know what you're getting right away, I think you do it. There's other guys like that. I just bringing up a couple guys there. Think about Cooper last year. He finished the year kind of hobbled. Think if he would have went down, you really had nothing other than Peoples-Jones. If you're going to have a pass-oriented offense with Watson, you really need some threats. I think he'll make guys look better, but I think some of the guys like Paris Campbell, McCole Hardman, Marquise Goodwin, those type guys could look good in this offense. It just comes down, when you look at the free agents, there's not many. I think Jacoby Myers on one of the lists I looked at was like the top free agent. And we saw last year with Chris Godwin, teams like the Buccaneers franchised him and Christian Kirk got like 16, 18 million a year to go to the Jaguars. You got to pay big to get a free agent wide receiver because there's not a lot of them, and there's even less of them this year. I think your best bet is the trade route. Be willing to take on a salary that maybe you can restructure for a year or two, and then you know what you got. I mean, Amari Cooper stepped on the field day one. You knew what you had, a Pro Bowl type wide receiver. You need another one similar, maybe not quite as good, but that would help.
I agree with you wholeheartedly about a veteran wide receiver. It will make the investment that you put into that quarterback pay off as well. Fred Greetham, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. Have a great day, guys.
All right, Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Check him out. Always great Browns coverage. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.